Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this session on leveraging the e-learning opportunity. My name is Madan, and on behalf of all of us at Your Story and the entire team at PayPal, we welcome you to this session. I'm the moderator for the session today, and I'm joined by Kashyap, Manan, Arjun, and Ashish. Kashyap Dalal is the co-founder and chief business officer of Simply Learn. Manan Kunna is the founder and CEO of QMath. Arjun Mohan is the India CEO of Upgrad, and Ashish Singla is the Director for Large Enterprise Growth at PayPal. The edtech sector in India, as you all know, has been witnessing significant investments both this year and in the previous years. It's currently valued at around $215 billion. The growth, of course, is being fueled a lot now thanks to the coronavirus lockdowns over the past few months. But in addition to the COVID lockdowns, there have been four other key drivers for edtech in India. One, of course, is the significantly lower costs for delivering education at scale online as compared to in classrooms. The second is the rise of internet and smartphone diffusion in India. The third is the rise of disposable income in Indian households. And the fourth, of course, is the very large consumer base. But beyond formal education, EdTech plays a big role also in skillings for professionals who want to come up with learning experiences beyond the classroom. So to further understand what the EdTech opportunity affords to players in India, PayPal and Your Story are organizing this virtual panel discussion with some of the key players in the EdTech sector in India. So PayPal has integrated its services with Indian education platforms online, providing them access to a global consumer base of over 300 million. So here's how it's going to work today. I'm going to ask each of our panelists a round of questions. Then we go to individual questions for each of the panel. And for those of you in the audience, please feel free to type your questions in the chat window on the right. So my first question to each of our panelists is, how have things changed in the lockdown because of the lockdown? People often classify this as BC, before coronavirus, and AD, after defeat of coronavirus. But we're still not there yet. But what has changed from pre-COVID to current COVID? Kashyap, let's begin with you. What has changed or trends for you in your space thanks to the lockdown? Kashyap?
Sure. Thanks, Madan. What maybe before I talk about what are the sector trends that we see, I think immediately when COVID struck, right? So in March, when we started getting this news and the lockdown started and stuff like that, I think the first sign that we saw in terms of data changing was essentially the learning time. And we saw our learning times skyrocket. So if I look at the months of March and April, our learners who were already on the platform, their learning time more than doubled. So we had learning time shooting up to 250% of what was earlier the norm. So what we could immediately see is that, as people were working from home, they were getting more time to themselves and they were spending more time upskilling themselves. I think that was the first sign that something different is happening. Post which I think the entire spike in terms of more people enrolling for programs started off around May and June. And what we actually feel is more this, that the way we read the signs of the market is that today there are two emotions that everybody is going through. One is, the entire fear and save money kind of emotion. And the other is more the insecurity around a person's career. So when we talk about the entire professional skilling market, we see that a lot of people are seeing and realizing that COVID is a once in a lifetime kind of a disruption. And it's immediately driving them to realize that this is a disruption where many careers may not ever recover from this disruption. And there will be careers which will actually skyrocket and move much faster after the disruption. So I think that is resulting in a stronger trend that basically on the professional side, we are definitely seeing very, very strong traction in terms of people making that proactive choice that, while I want to save on cash, I should invest into making sure that my career is, recession proof after COVID. It should not be that I find myself in a place that I'm unemployable post the crisis, because a lot of the jobs are moving to digital tech and stuff like that. So I think those are some of the trends that we are seeing. And of course, the largest of them all is more this entire mandate that earlier there used to be a discussion that, should I learn offline or should I learn online? Now the discussion is basically over. So there is no option. Whatever program that you want to do, whether it's K-12 or upskilling or degrees or whatever may it be, it's all online, right? So I mean, that kind of becomes a new baseline and accelerates the entire change that perhaps this kind of behavior change might have taken 10 years. It's happened in a matter of months. So I think those are some top of mind thoughts of what we see as a result of the entire disruption that we've been going through.
So there is no other option but online. Manan, is that true for you also? In the case of QMath also, is this a scenario?
Yeah, so Madan, I see three very clear trends as I talk to our parents, as I talk to our teachers. The first one is, and it's a pretty large segment of the market, is simply that online can work, and the skepticism that was there initially has gone away. Online can work, online can create learning outcomes. So even if some reversion to the mean happens after COVID, online is here to stay. That's the first trend I see. The second trend, which is not as big yet, but I can clearly see some pretty significant signs of it, is that online is better than offline. So it cannot just work, it's better than offline, not just from a logistics point of view, there's no travel issues and so on, but you can also create more personalization, you can create more gamification, there's so many additional things you can do in online that you can't do in offline. So that's the second trend I'm seeing. And the third trend I'm seeing, which is evident maybe pretty widely now, is that the battleground is now shifting from offline to online, which basically means that the next set of big companies emerging from the education space will all be online and not offline. So I think this is like a major reset. It's a tectonic shift in consumer behavior. It's a once in a generation movement clearly, and as has often been repeated now, it's like the demonetization movement of the education space.
Okay, so it's not just a question of it can work online, but it works very well online. Arjun,
Yeah.
is that true for you as well? It works very well online?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a believer to jump into conclusion now, but yeah, it's moving in the right direction. So let's hope it goes there. To answer the initial question of the trends, what has been happening from the beginning of April, or you can say end of March, is that there has been substantial increase in traffic. So definitely, as Kashyap mentioned, there has been a lot of people coming and trying to learn. A lot of these fence sitters who never really believed that online can work suddenly don't have an option are coming and trying. So I could see a 5x, 6x jump in traffic, and it's kind of stabilizing to a 4x now that we are through this for quite a few months now. You could see that in the month of July, there was a lot of exuberance that it's all over, it's coming back. In August, again, it plummeted. So it's a market where I think it will be naive to draw conclusions now. Whatever we have learned in our business lives, right? That's look at last quarter number, look at what happened in 5 years, right? All those are out of the window now. You should see what happened yesterday to make a decision today. That's the situation we are in. On the actual monetization front, which is what I mean, at least companies like us care about, because although Edtech has been doing really well in terms of investment, at least some companies have been very clear that we want to run with our own bootstrap money. So at least for us, and I'm sure for Simply Learn also, we have been clear that we need to monetize all this traffic. So that's been our effort starting from April on how do we monetize it out? How do we actually convert it into revenue part? So that is where I would say the bigger game has been. How do you convert these people who who are getting exposed to something like this for the first time in their life? How do we make them pay that kind of ticket size, which for an average Indian is actually on a higher side, typical kind of TG you look at. So I would say that if the traffic is 5x, 6x, the revenue part growth could be in the range of a 1.8 to 2.5x. And that also has happened with a lot of sales and marketing effort, because simply put, as you all have seen, there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. Everyone knows that they need to upskill to survive, but at the same time, nobody knows if I'll have a job tomorrow. So it's a game where people are pretty confused. A lot of work has been done in actually engaging the customer, ensuring that even though the longer sales cycle, which has really happened, really helps in converting. Typically what happens in a sales cycle of this length is that people lose interest and it just drops off. So the effort has been all about how do we ensure that the customer journey, which is getting prolonged now, actually converts. So these are the macro trends I'm seeing now. I mean, as I mentioned, it's a learning every single day. You struggle, you learn, you keep doing this. That is what we are all doing today.
Thanks, Arjun. You shared some good lessons and some very good numbers also. We'll come to those numbers a bit later. But Ashish, you're seeing this sectoral impact across sectors, education, finance, a whole bunch of sectors. So what are you seeing in terms of EdTech and the pandemic effect?
Well, thanks, Dr. Mohan. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. But yes, as you rightly said, right, means for us, we see things across sectors. Uh, while digital payments, also similar to EduTech, has seen a very significant growth, and I'll talk about that. But before we talk about that, I also want to call out there are few sectors like hospitality, travel, and others which are very, very badly impacted. And kind of we work with those all across sectors, right? So we are doing whatever we can to support those businesses and small businesses in whatever form or shape we can, right? Whether through grants, through kind of providing them options to kind of come online, do other things, and stuff like that. Now, talking specifically about the digital payments, right? When we see, so means as Kashyap was saying, right? We saw it in three different phases. There was a Q1 phase when means things started happening in China, right? And until then, being a global organization, we felt that means yes, there is a China impact on our revenues, and we need to see where else we can make up for it, right? But as we got closer to the end of Q1, it became a global phenomena, and almost end of March to April, things were pretty much standstill, right? Almost means the numbers fell down and things like that. But then came the phase where means things just skyrocketed, right? In terms, people started finding new ways of making payments. All offline started moving online, and the companies who were kind of innovating and being ahead of the curve, right? Whoever were there at the right time at the right place started benefiting out of it, right? And means we recently announced our Q2 results, and the number of new consumers that we added to our platform, it was 21 million, right? That's more than 100% quarter on quarter jump, with almost 1 month of the quarter just gone without any major things happening, right? So that's a level of growth that we are seeing. And within that, one trend that we are seeing is typically means millennials, youngsters are the ones who go into digital payments and early adopters. But this pandemic, we are seeing more people of our ages, right? They are also adopting, or even elder people are adopting. And these are the people who have more disposable income, more money to spend. So our ticket sizes have also started going up accordingly, right? And now the question is, what will be the new normal, right? So broad trend, what we are seeing, I was reading an article today morning, right? Whatever could happen in 10 years, a change in consumer behavior that was expected to happen in 10 years, it has happened in 3 months, right? And EduTech is key example of that. Who could have thought about that a kid of 4-year age could learn online without any issues, right? So those kind of things we are seeing, and the question is, how can companies continue to innovate to keep that momentum going, moving from offline to online? For us, cash is always the key competition, right? It's not about other players, but the cash economy or the offline economy. How can we move it online and digital ways of making payment? That's what our focus is.
Thanks, Ashish. So clearly behavior is changing very fast. Is the experience changing fast enough? Let's come to that question now. Let me ask each of you, how can the learning experience be improved? As all of you have mentioned, many people are coming online for the very first time. And for them, it's a bit of a new experience. So in terms of technology, design, UX, the whole interaction, etc., how can things be improved? Kashyap, can you address some of these issues you're facing here?
Sure. So I think before we look at how or what needs to change to continue scaling at this level, it's very important to understand that how is the learner profile also changing. So, for example, before this, the way I look at it is that before this entire mass adoption has happened, that everybody has to move online. There's no option. Before that, the way we looked at the entire trend was that there is normally a very gradual adoption. That you have early adopters, and early adopters are normally very self-driven, and they are pretty okay that if you've got content, then they will know how to understand and upskill themselves. But as mass adoption happens in any field, as the masses adopt, then the need of the education pattern needs to be different. And that is what we are seeing, that as you get a huge volume of people adopting online programs, the average learner profile is changing. And this is going to change even more over the next couple of years. And what we see is an average learner actually requires a lot more of high touch learning than just pure e-learning. So for the longest time, if I look at from the 1990s to early 2000 to maybe up to 2010, when we talked about edtech, it was always e-learning. It was always videos. But now if you look at it for the last 5 to 7 years, already there's been huge growth in terms of blended learning, online boot camps, online classrooms, where there's a lot of interaction, a lot of online classes happening. That is going to get even more critical because the average learner now needs more interaction, more help, more support in the entire learning process. He is not the early adopter who's happy with a video and he'll do the rest on his own. So I think that is one very, very strong trend that I see coming out of this entire disruption that we are seeing. I think a similar trend riding on more or less the same change is also the entire angle of learning by doing. So typically for a early adopter, it is okay to understand theory and then apply it himself. But for as mass adoption happens, and in general, when people are looking at clear outcomes out of the entire program that they are doing online, it's extremely important to have a very, very strong component of learning by doing. So if I were to say those would be the top two trends that I see, and then that's what at Simplilearn we are optimizing towards. That how can you make very, very interactive learning programs where for the average learner, it is the completion is way, way more likely than it was earlier, and coupled with very, very strong component of projects, labs, learning by doing, those kind of things, so that a person is visibly doing something and therefore learning has to happen. There's no chance that he just heard a lot of stuff and then forgot about it. I mean, if he's actually implemented something, then definitely he's taken something out of it. So those would be the top two things that then I think we are trending towards.
Yeah, thanks, Kashyap. Now let me ask Manan, how do you think access to learning technologies can be improved for more people?
So I think, so far I don't have a very definitive point of view, Madan, on that. But as Arjun also said, we're still in the middle of that transition. But whenever a shift of this magnitude happens, obviously there will be some teething issues. I think access to devices, access to internet, all of those issues will get solved over a period of time, next few months, if not a couple of years. And I don't think that is going to be a barrier for widespread adoption of learning tech. But just to the other point that you asked earlier on the experience bit, let me just share a couple of thoughts on that from a K-12 perspective, Madan. Learner profile is obviously changing. We are getting a lot more of the younger segments. As Ashish said, kids as young as age 4 or age 5 are coming onto the platform and learning and doing very, very well. But I think the secret now will be to on 2-3 fronts. The effort will be on 2-3 fronts. One is to create a very personalized experience, personalized learning path for each learner, because every learner is unique, every learner has different needs and so on. And the other is to focus a lot more on learner engagement. As Kashyap said, gone are the days of passive consumption of content. I think today, if a platform has to work at a widespread scale, it has to be very active. It has to be hands-on. Engagement has to be, on top in terms of retaining students and so on. So yeah, some thoughts on experience.
Okay, so access is improving. Is that true for you also, Arjun? Access is improving. More people are coming online. They're more happy with their online experience for education.
Yeah. So, see, I am a firm believer that access won't be a problem going forward because, the device we all carry today, right? The smartphone is all that you need to go online and learn or to do a digital payment, whatever it is. What companies like us have done is that we have continuously optimized our product to ensure that it works on that ubiquitous device you have with you. So except for the coding platforms, which obviously needs a keyboard, most of the consumption, may it be active or passive consumption, can be done on your mobile phone today. And which is also one of the reasons why the industry is able to seamlessly adapt to this change in the consumer pattern which is happening. It's no longer that geek introvert who is deep into coding, who's coming to a platform and learning things. It's a mass audience. Everyone knows that upskilling is important today. So I honestly believe that the reason why companies like us exist today is because education infrastructure in India is curtailing access. It is because of companies like us that we are able to reach to that masses, and this will be the next age of education.
Okay, Arjun. So all of you have mentioned that access is not going to be such a big barrier going ahead. But how about changing the mass education experience? In other words, how can we customize the whole education experience for the learners? Kashyap, do you want to take a stab at how is things like AI, ML, how are these helping improve not just the access and the content, but going beyond content to the customized experience for individual learners? How good is this medium in your opinion?
No, absolutely, Madan. Actually, in fact, we look at that as one of the primary problems that education has to optimize for, not just for online education but offline education as well. So I'll take an example. So the biggest challenge that any class faces, any cohort of learners faces, is that whatever be the pedagogy or whatever be the learning experience, there is a fraction of the class which feels that it is too basic, and there is a fraction of the class which feels that it is too advanced, right? So, and this same thing, it's not a problem of online education. The same thing happens in a university classroom as well. That some people will find it too boring and too basic, and some people will find it going over their head, right? So, the way that AI can fix it, and which is where going back to Manan's point, that online education it not only works, it will work better, is because we can implement AI in the online education system and tailor the entire learning experience to a person's level. So if a person is feeling left behind or not scoring well enough on the quiz, then suddenly his learning curve kind of flattens out. If somebody is acing the quiz, then he starts learning faster. These are implementations that are possible through AI, and I think that would be one of the biggest implementations that I think most companies would be working on, and we are definitely working on to make that experience perfect for every class of learners in the entire batch that we onboard. I think that's one. The second area that we are working on as a slightly more future focused project is more that when we have online classrooms and you have, let's say, 50 people learning from a industry expert or a professor, over there, how can we use AI in terms of visual detection to find out the attention span and try and see if there can be some proactive intervention? So this is something that as we scale, this is going to get more and more critical for companies who can deliver engagement at scale. And while it's very early days, but I mean a dream scenario, and I'm sure somebody will crack it, either us or some other company, but somebody is going to crack this kind of a system that an online classroom is 10x more intelligent than an offline classroom, where the trainer or the teacher gets very, very clear cues from the AI saying that, these are the 5 people who seem to be distracted. Why don't you serve a quiz to them or something like that? So some kind of suggested intervention comes up from AI side itself. So I think these are a couple of areas where, next 5-10 years are going to be very exciting.
Great. So it's not just a question of scale, it's a question of quality and customization. So in your case, Manan, how are you taking a look at using AI and able to customize your whole math customized offerings?
So completely in line with how Kashyap described it, we have an internal product design philosophy that we call the Goldilocks Zone. It's a concept in astronomy that basically says that if a planet is too near or too far from a host star, life won't appear on it because it'll either be too hot or too cold. It has to be in a very narrow band of distance from the host star. And similarly, the learner has to always be kept in a very narrow band of challenge level. The problem you're presenting to the learner has to be neither too difficult, it has to be neither too easy, otherwise the learner will get disengaged. And that we believe that is a holy grail in terms of creating learning outcomes. If you're able to do that smartly, every learner will always be in the right challenge level and learning outcomes will be exponentially faster. And to do that, obviously smart AI ML systems will be needed. We are already working on those. We have like millions of data points being generated through our classes on a daily basis, and we know exactly what response each question generates, for example, across a wide spectrum of users. So we can use that data to build smart models. So if I were teaching you one-to-one, I could calibrate that in real time. I could give you a question and I could say, okay, the next question should be this one. That is the kind of personalization we want to create with a smart AI system that constantly calibrates and always keeps the learner in the Goldilocks zone. So that is a very big focus area for us as well.
So the data can give you very good insights. Arjun, you must have tons of data also, right? So how are you using this along with AI to improve the whole learning experience on your platform?
So I don't have anything further to add. I think both Kashyap and Manan had covered most of the personalization aspect. So I'll just speak a bit about my experience. So I've been in, I would say, literally every domain of Edtech in India. Started my career in K-12 and did early learn, K4, K3, whatever you want to say, and finally now in the professional education. what I've seen all throughout, maybe test prep or working professional, whatever it is, it's always the issue of one size fits all solution, which finally disrupts the engagement. There are always people who wants to go fast. There are always people who just lose their focus. I won't say want to go slow. It is majorly about they get bored and lose their focus. So in my earlier company, that's Byju's, we always worked on this concept of edutainment. And this was the early days of Edtech, which was about passive learning and videos. It's always about how do I make this video so attractive, so curious, so that the kid will keep listening to me. That was the idea. Over a period of time, technology has taken over that. It has been about building those personalized learn journeys. It is about those knowledge nodes and the nerve ends which you connect and try to put in every student in that, what do you say, millions of neural network. So the idea is that with so much of data and the computing you have these days, I mean, you can say machine learning or AI, all those buzzwords, but finally what you're trying to do is you're trying to tell every student that you are unique, and hence what you will like and how you will learn will be in a different manner. Moment I'm able to crack it, I will be able to give you that content and experience which you will like, and hence you will learn. Now you may learn the visual way, you may learn the auditory way, you may learn by doing. That is for me to figure out, which is what I will do by regressing millions and trillions of data bytes, or figuring out how this person or how this kid is engaging on my platform, so on and so forth. But yes, everyone is on it. It's not an easy problem to solve, but I think these are problems which can be only solved by online education.
Thanks, Arjun. So, Ashish, we've heard a very interesting range of innovative solutions to problems like access, device, curriculum, customization, and so on. What are some problems you are seeing in this space, and how are you positioning yourself to help the whole ecosystem evolve?
Yeah. So yes, let me talk about on the payment side how we've been working with the edutech sector, right? As I said. So let me means there are range of customers, right, that we have, from a very young startup to a very evolved organization like Upgrad or Simply Learn and QMath, right? So on the young startups, right, what matters to them is how soon they can get going and accept payments from anywhere in the globe, right? It means once they've closed the sale, how soon can they easily accept the payment and make it seamless, right? So a lot of our product solutions are like, means you can just get online within 10 minutes and just get going, right? And means from our 325 million, 340 million latest number, right? You can accept payments within 10 minutes of you first opening a PayPal account, right? That's how simple we have tried to make it, and we continue to evolve that journey, right? There is no end to making things simple. So means again, on the consumer side, what we try and do is what we call as ambient payments, right? Means all of us may have seen the Uber kind of a payment experience where there is no payment per se, right? Everything happens in the background. And that's the journey that we are on. How do we make it very, very seamless payment experience? And specifically on the edutech sector, let me also talk about, means I think Kashyap and Manan both spoke about the high ticket sizes, right? So now means how, in order for edutech companies to monetize and close the sale faster, right? In the international means kind of market, are products like credit, right? Where we provide easy options for consumers to pay a high ticket size in multiple installments without kind of hampering the sale and giving all the money upfront to the merchant, right? To make sure that the working capital is there, right? Things like that, making real-time decisions through data that yes, this consumer is good, I can give them the credit and to be able to close the sale, right? This helps companies close sale faster, right? And kind of all that whole cycle time gets reduced. So we are looking at how do we expand the credit capabilities to across the globe. I mean, challenges are that every country has its own kind of regulations from a credit perspective, things like that. So we're kind of phase by phase looking at different markets and opening up our credit capabilities to help these kind of sales happening faster and people moving more digital. So some of these things I think are key areas that we are focusing on.
Thanks, Ashish, for bringing that other very important piece of transaction and the whole regulatory part, regulations of payment in different countries. So we're now about halfway through our program, and I see a lot of questions coming in from the audience. Please keep those questions coming in the chat window. And the next question is coming from the audience, and it's about innovations in pedagogy. So let me ask Manan this question. We've talked already about curriculum and AI, customization, etc. What about any innovations you're seeing in the pedagogy, how it's taught, things of that sort? Anything you want to add over here?
Yeah, I think in the online setting, we can make the curriculum a lot more visual, a lot more engaging, a lot more interactive with the student. So, for example, in our curriculum, we have something called math simulations, which kids can interact with and visualize and kind of dive deeper into some of the more challenging concepts. I think the online format allows that to be a lot better. I think apart from that, this whole idea of learner engagement through gamification is something we're focusing on quite heavily. If done right, it can have disproportionate impact on engagement. So if you blend the curriculum really properly with a very effective gamification system, it can really create deep, long-lasting kind of engagement for the learner. So that is something we're focusing on heavily. So apart from all the other stuff we used to do earlier pre-COVID, we have started focusing a lot more on these elements as well.
So in your case, Kashyap, what are some courses that are very popular for upskilling? What are some curriculum changes? What are some new approaches you're applying for pedagogy?
So I think if we break that into two parts, the trend that we are seeing in terms of the programs which are attracting most interest, I think this aligns with what people are reading, that the industries or the careers which are going to do well as a result of the entire shift towards digital. And there the top list would be more areas like digital marketing, data, cloud, cybersecurity, and so on. So these are the areas which are direct beneficiaries of the percentage of commerce or percentage of time spent moving online. So those are the areas where we are seeing maximum traction. On the other side, in terms of pedagogy, the kind of changes that we are making, I think I touched upon it briefly, that I think the main focus is more how do we make our programs more and more focused on learning by doing. So some of the newer programs, the way they are architected is basically more this, that the entire program itself is a project, that from the first lesson to the last lesson, you are piece by piece teaching a person to build out a project. So let's say, for example, if we are talking about full stack development, then if the end goal is to build out a mobile app, or if the end goal is to basically build out some kind of ERP or CRM or whatever be the project that somebody picks up, then can we tailor it that way? So some of our programs are moving in that direction, and we are seeing great success in terms of the engagement that it builds. So that's actually the direction that we are spending most of our time on, that the entire program is a project, and we are kind of building up to a outcome that a person actually was able to do this as a part of the program, so that actual learning happens.
Great. So engagement is improving across the board depending on how you package it and so on. So Arjun, a while earlier you shared some very good numbers on overall growth, monetization growth, and so on. So what are some of the ways, some tips you would suggest for people on how to convert growth traffic into traction, into getting some revenue out of it?
I don't think people here needs any tips. They are all masters in their game already. But yeah, so as I told earlier also, this time, the COVID-19 times has been quite challenging. It's been something which has forced us to relearn, each one of us, to figure out what's next, because there's no history, right? You will have to go back to 1300s to see a incident like this. So what we have been doing is quite simple. We said that, okay, there's only one person who decides what we should do next. That's the customer. Keeping him at the center of your universe, trying to figure out what he or she wants. So one thing which we have been doing very closely day after day, week after week, is tracking what is the customer talking about. What are his needs? What are his fears? What are his aspirations? And how it has been evolving almost on a monthly, weekly basis. And we are seeing that. It's a constant dynamic process. So that's been one of the things. And then, of course, it's all about building out a strong, powerful sales and marketing ecosystems. I think this work from home and having a sales force make them work from home has been quite challenging. That's been, I would say, if you ask me what are the biggest challenges I face, that will be number one. And that, yeah. So these are the one or two things we have been trying to do right. It's as I mentioned earlier also, it's a constantly evolving process. It's a learning process. Probably all these things will go wrong tomorrow, then we'll again learn and figure out what is the solution for the next problem.
Thanks, Arjun. You mentioned that there's a significant potential for revenue growth in the coming years. In fact, Ashish, it's been said that next year in 2021, there'll be as many as 10 million students who are willing to be able to pay for online education. So what are some ways in which you think this whole piece can be smoothened? How to make it easier for people to be able to choose courses and be able to pay for them online, things of that sort? Where do you come in this part of the equation?
Yeah, I think that's where PayPal plays a critical part. So, see, means what I would say is that, see, means payment at the end of the day, it depends on the sector. In this sector, as I mentioned earlier, the ticket sizes are relatively high. So whoever can make the payment, mean, how do you make it convenient for anybody to make that kind of a ticket size pay? So things like our credit solutions make it really easy for the customers to take that plunge, right? Initial plunge. Another thing, as we are looking at the international markets, right, means more and more means Indian companies looking abroad to acquire consumers, right? Which is a trend which will kind of grow over a period of time, right? How do you provide a secure platform to a customer where they can trust that the payment that I am making is completely safe and secure, right? Nobody wants to share their digital payment information on an internet, and especially imagine a small company which a customer sitting in US has no clue about. Now, if you have to make a payment of say $1,000 to that merchant, it is very difficult for anybody to make that decision, and that's where kind of a company like a PayPal, which provides that trust platform, that anything that goes wrong in this journey, right? It's a long cycle, because once you enroll for a course, it typically goes for 3 months, 6 months, and things like that, right? So during the course, imagine the company shuts down, right? Means when it's a young startup, anything can happen. But that's where PayPal provides that trust that tomorrow, anything that goes wrong, we are there to back you up, and you can make that payment securely, right? So those are the kind of things that I think makes it easier for anybody to start moving digital and gets that confidence going.
Thanks. So there's an issue of confidence and trust in this space over here now. My next question is for each of you, Kashyap, Arjun, and Manan, which is on the comparison between online and offline. A lot of people still think, classroom is better, online is just a substitute, etc. But how do you get people on board with the notion that online can be as good or maybe even better than offline, than online? In fact, one question from the audience is, can government be a big player in this by regulating and by telling people, yes, education should move online? So what are you doing, and how can government help in this whole positioning of online versus offline? Kashyap?
So I think the entire this debate is a never-ending debate, and I think prior to the COVID situation, this was perhaps one of the biggest questions that online companies were trying to answer and win over customers, that you're going to get much better experience over here compared to most of the offline options available. I think the disruption, in fact, what the way it plays out most positively for Edtech is by creating this small window where there is no offline option. And that forces people to experience the online option and realize that, oh, I never had any idea that it is so great. Right. And that is what is long term. The expectation is more that, let's say, a year down the line, even if both the options are again available for a person, he is going to stick on to online because now he's exposed to it. Now he understands the value that gets unlocked. So I think that's one part of it. It is just about now knowing what online offers rather than just sticking on to the old thought process that offline is good, online is untested. I don't know, right? So I mean, I think that experience has happened. The second part is more that, one of the things that if, let's say now, once people have experienced online and after a year, if both the options open up, one of the things that I see as a very, very strong driver is the consolidation. So consolidation, what I mean by that is that, so most of the times people never thought about it. Let's say if I am in a smaller town, if I'm in Mysore, probably I'm thinking about my neighborhood college or some college in Mysore, because that's convenient. I mean, somewhere that's how most people used to plan. But when they are forced to think about online, and when they know that even degrees are now available online, and government has played a role in that in terms of easing the entire system of having online degrees and online diplomas which are recognized by universities. What that does is that if, let's say, my neighborhood college is also right now teaching online, and I can do an online program directly with an IIT or a Caltech or an MIT or one of the top institutes of the world, then do I really need to go to my neighborhood college, right? And that becomes a very, very interesting question. That basically, if online, if the kind of choices that I have available are so credible and such high quality of delivery, then why would I go back to a small college which was in my neighborhood? And earlier maybe it was a decision out of comfort and ease and convenience, rather than actually thinking that what is the best choice for you. So I think some of these variables will skew it in the favor of online, that the kind of value that gets unlocked, you can get the best trainer in the world online, right? Now, the best trainer in the world may not be there in your neighborhood. So would you want to learn from the best trainer, or do you want to stick on that the closest college, let me go and get myself admitted there, right? So these are some questions that are undeniable. I think it's very difficult to go away from them.
That's a very good argument. Learn from the best. What about in your case, Manan? How are you positioning the unique aspects of your platform as an online delivery channel as compared to offline?
Yeah, so many points that Kashyap has covered. I think some of our most skeptical teachers and parents also have started saying that, okay, this is a lot better and this is a lot more effective in many ways. So one of the examples is, for example, not every teacher is ideally suited to every student. So if a student is coming in, a certain kind of teacher may work better with them, but that teacher may not be available in the immediate neighborhood of that student. But the online platform allows you to match the right student to the right teacher, and we've already started doing a lot of those things. And obviously, all the other stuff that we talked about previously, like engagement and personalization and so on. So I think what COVID has done really, and what Kashyap said as well, is that it's given us this window to kind of cross over that activation barrier in terms of trying out online. And a huge, segment of the consumer base has gone over that activation barrier because there was no other choice in these few months, and has now experienced firsthand that, okay, this is a real effective mode of learning. So when COVID goes away, there will obviously be some reversion to mean that will happen. I'm not saying that offline will go away. That is not going to happen. But a much more significant percentage of the population will be on online platforms. I think to your other point of will the government also come in and so on, I think that's a much longer cycle. I think for now, this drive will still be through private players, like all of us here, and then through large corporations. For example, I was reading recently that Google has come out with a new, criteria for accepting employees, where they will accept a degree that or an online course that costs maybe 2 or 3 orders of magnitude less than a university degree, right? When more of these things start to happen, people will start to realize that, okay, these certifications and these online courses are not just good to have anymore; they are actually more mainstream. But I think the movement will still be driven by private players, at least in the short to medium term.
Thanks. How about you, Arjun? What's your argument for why online is so good as compared to offline?
Yeah. So, see, there's a saying in marketing which goes like this: to sell a product, it takes a few weeks. To sell an idea, it takes a few months. But if you're changing someone's habit, it takes years. So that's what online education has been doing, and especially for us in the professional learning space, professional learning space, working professional space, it's about changing a habit of a person who has done offline education for at least 15 years. It's not an easy sell at all, right? It takes time, which is the reason why we have been patient. We have been improving things. We have been saying that whatever a university does, we can do it online better. We can give you access to the best teachers. We can give you personalized experiences. We can teach you coding with a real platform, so on and so forth. So we've been doing, I would say we have been incrementally improving our reach, picking up each and every person and convincing him that this is the way it is, getting more and more believers day after day. COVID, of course, presented us with a unique opportunity, and I think every one of us is using it to the maximum possible way. We are aggressively going behind everyone who is ready to listen today, and fortunately, there are a lot of people listening. So, so the work is on. Just want to speak about one aspect which we have always believed in, especially in the working professional segment. Finally, all the things you're doing, may it be certification, may it be the diplomas, be it be the degree program. In India, all these things are done not for the sake of knowledge. It's done for this life transformational experience of getting a job and improving your livelihood. So one important stakeholder, in my opinion, who should accept whatever we are doing online are the employers. If in this scenario, if we are able to convince the employers that the quality of our students, our learners, is as good or better than what they can find in the best of the universities, then that's it. Moment they accept it, everyone else will accept it, because people just go for that, right?
Yeah.
So that is what the effort has been. That's what everyone is working towards.
Great. Thanks, Arjun. So clearly, online versus offline has been one big issue. Ashish, another big question has been India versus global. So how are you helping Indian players going abroad, foreign players coming into India? So it's a global knowledge marketplace. So what are you guys doing in this space?
No, that's a great question. So see, India presents India itself is a huge market, right? So there is no denying that. But at the same time, there is a huge international market. And I think we spoke a lot about monetization piece. What organizations are realizing and more will realize that as the margin pressures start building up, right? The profitability grows up as you move international because the spending power is much higher, right? So that's the trend that we are seeing, that organizations in India are looking to move out. And what I personally feel, this is a BPOization movement for India, right? Where companies need to realize what are they uniquely being able to solve and what our demographic advantage in India is and how we can leverage that to the best of our abilities, right? What BPO industry did, I think today it's a moment for the education sector, because imagine a kid in US also has the same need of education as in India, but the tutor there costs anywhere from $50 to even $100, right, per hour. Whereas we can provide the same quality, maybe better quality, right, at fraction of that cost, right, and still be much more profitable, right? So that's what companies are realizing and looking at, moving more and more business to international, getting more profitability into that. And I think it means, I truly believe that India's demographic advantage that we have, no other country would be able to match. And that's the advantage we need to take. And that's why for Indian organizations, looking abroad is so much more important. And PayPal, that's the means kind of what we are enabling organizations. Like I mentioned, we work with all Upgrad, QMath, Simply Learn, everybody to help them look at international and grow their international businesses.
Thanks, Ashish. I think all of you on the panel have talked very eloquently about the different kinds of what growth means to this sector. Let's bring in Naveen now into the discussion. Naveen Misri is the Director of Growth for the SMB and new international initiatives at PayPal. Naveen, can we hear from you on some of your PayPal's initiatives to help companies go global and grow in this space?
Thanks, Madan, and thanks for your story. I just want to take the discussion forward, where our esteemed panelists shared some of the insights and some of the opportunities lying in the huge Edtech sector, especially in a COVID scenario also. So if you're just to summarize and just move to the next slide, what are the five bigger points which is right there for every Edtech player in India to see? One, my colleague Ashish mentioned that India can be one of the lead in terms of education sector around the world, and purely by the kind of the kind of the tuition, the teachers we have in India, the students we have in India, and this does not restrict only to India, but across the globe, right? So that's number one. So India, in a space of Edtech, which is just coming up, we have a huge sort of, let's say, opportunity. And some of the startups are doing a great innovation in terms of customization, in terms of making learning fun, and we have heard from all the players who've been just on the panelist. The second, the online education market, is sort of, let's say, has taken a huge rocket kind of growth estimation, and it's now pegged at close to 3.5 to 4 billion, which will be seen in next 2 to 3 years. And this is just a number, and what we heard from the panelists, and this is just a scratch on the surface, and there's a huge potential, and this number can go far more higher than what it is, right? The third trend is not only the K-12 segment, which is growing, but the new innovations also happening in the upskilling segment, which is also have seen a huge increase. And just to example, people learn professional courses, people enhance their skills, people learn various interest learning, and this is really coming up together. And India is sort of one of the center of learnings in terms of the upskilling, in terms of various innovations learnings, and that's what we are witnessing so far. Fourth point is not only this is just restricted to the educations, which is just on the private players, but we have seen, some of our panelists, spoke on this, that maybe short to medium term it's more about, the private players, but in the long run, there will be the school, colleges, and we have witnessed, that some of the schools and colleges and even the private tutors are coming online and taking the tuitions online. So this is going to go spread, and at the end of the day, it's about accessibility in terms of how well these courses are getting accepted, and that was one of the point again mentioned by one of our panelists. And last not the least, so therefore to really take the center stage or to really grow the business, the key differentiator will be on this five most important things, right? What syllabus you bring on the table for the students, what sort of language options you have, because not necessarily the education is just about English, but what about the regional languages, how well you can spread in terms of regional languages spread, and not only the regional language in India, but now when you really take your platform to the global, it's more than maybe 200, 500 spoken languages around the world, where the courses can be customized, right? We spoke about the penetration, and one of the key things is obviously how the price looks like. People do set of take into considerations, and they value the course based on what of the behavioral change it will make to their life, whether these courses are based for the jobs or whether these courses are only for upskill, and therefore the price will gonna play a very critical price levers to really convert the students online. Pedagogy, offline support, teacher training, again this will become a key sort of, let's say, influencer and a key parameter for students to come online and start taking the businesses or start applying for the courses which any edutech player in India is offering. So just a summary of what some of the insights were shared in the previous session, and this is the similar, and I'm glad that it's coming all together, and there's some tally around the thoughts which all the co-founders and the panelists have spoken in the previous session. And this is some of the validation which we see across the world, and PayPal, it's agnostic of any platform. People can use PayPal, whether it's a marketplace of edutech, platform, or it's a private label. So we sort of, let's say, have a huge data understanding and a trend understandings in how the world is shaping up. And to be honest, this trend is just picking up in last 4 to 6 months. And as we really move and progress next year, we might see a much more detailed insight in terms of how it's going to scale it further. And therefore, what is important, and Ashish in the previous session did mention that, and when it really takes to global, these are the 4 important parameters which, when you really give an option to the buyer, where you'll start seeing the conversion, right? And number one is about you can go global, but where are the consumers and who can bring consumers? And that's where PayPal stands out, because PayPal is like a global company. We have more than 364 consumer around the world, more than presence in 200 marketplace, and we accept more than 100 currencies. So you are a startup in India and you have courses which you believe that these courses are for the global students or a particular sets of a country or a specific particular upskilling kind of courses which can attract a global consumer. Here is the opportunity where we bring this kind of, let's say, traffic to your platform. Consumer credit offering, again, this is something, I relate this point to the price point, because this is where if it's really putting a hold on the people wallets, that's where the conversion might start drop. And in PayPal, in certain markets, we do offer consumer credit based on the customer history and various other parameters, which also helps is number one, the merchants in India or the Edtech company in India, they get upfront payment when customers starts it selects the consumer credit to pay that money. So for a startup, it's like a peace of mind kind of payment, because if the consumer is paid through a consumer credit, we still remit 100% to the merchant. So that's again one of the unique model we have. The third part is the next gen subscription, where the consumer can one is, if your model is a recurring one and a subscription one, we can offer a very, very easy way to really integrate this kind of, let's say, model to your platform. And last not the least is the invoicing and email payments, where some edutech platforms have a sales model where there's a speaking, I mean there's a consultant or a salesperson or a speaker on the phone to really give a more detailed insight of the courses, and that's where the courses get the sales conversion happens. And with PayPal, you can immediately send a real-time payment link or an email link to the buyer to really make them pay and convert their convert the customer to your platform. Besides this, one of the unique feature we have is a buyer-seller protection, where PayPal is like a two-sided network. We have a buyer registration and we know the buyer history. We have a merchant registration and we have merchant history, and we play a middle role where we know that how do we protect both consumer and as well as merchant, and that is a unique value proposition which PayPal has, and probably I can say no other players in India have that kind of protection. So these are the four elements which we can immediately provide to any startup who is edutech segment in India or just about startup, and bring a very differentiator experiences or services, and join the big wigs of Upgrade, Simply Learn, or QMath, and all put together. All we can do is we can create a huge industry from India, to serve the global market, right? And it's just a beginning of the journey on the edtech sector. So that's a short and simple summary I just wanted to share for the people who are interested in knowing more information or customized solutions. This is one on the email ID, which is in_sales@paypal.com. Please feel free to share any of your questions, thoughts, or what are the customized solutions you are looking at, or anything else. We will definitely reach out to you and take this initiative. So that's it, Madan, from my end. Over back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Naveen. We just heard from Naveen Mistry, Director of Growth for SMB and New Initiatives at PayPal. He shared with us a very good framework of PayPal's offerings for players in this space. I liked some of his insights on next generation subscriptions, very interesting principles for those going ahead with microtransactions, service-oriented learning, things of that sort. I'm told that we still have time. We can squeeze in one last question. And this question is a very interesting one. It says, one challenge in online education is the student-to-student interaction seems to be missing. So when students go to schools, they play with other children, they learn from each other, etc. So what can we do to make this kind of interaction happen online? And maybe in the case of Ashish, you can even talk about students teaching each other and becoming teachers and platforms and paying each other almost. So maybe we'll start with you, Kashyap. Are you looking at student-to-student interactions in some way, both on your platform or in general?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we try to do is more this that once a cohort starts learning, then how do we basically create interaction and cross learning from these students, with each other as well. And one of the things that plays out for us, I mean, also adding into one of the earlier threads that we were talking about Indian Edtech going global. So Simplilearn is, as a business, we get about 40% of our business from India, and the rest is international. So North America is a huge market for us. So one of the things in terms of, on the professional side, what also happens and creates value is that our cohorts are very, very multicultural. So for example, if there is a cohort getting into a data program, then there will be people from India, there'll be people from US, there'll be people from all over the world. And a lot of the learning happens through the kind of questions that different people ask. So you end up having a very interesting cohort that it's geographically diverse, it's diverse in terms of industry, it's diverse in terms of the kind of roles that people are coming from, and becomes a very enriching experience in that sense.
Manan, in your case, how are you looking at student-to-student interaction, socialization of learning in just a minute or so?
If you tap student-to-student interactions properly, they can have a huge impact on engagement. So, for example, one of the features in our class is a leaderboard that keeps running in terms of it ranks students in real time in terms of how much work they have done. So you have to implement it carefully so that it's not demotivating for a certain cohort of students. But if you do it right, it can dramatically up the engagement quotient, and it can dramatically up the amount of work that kids are willing to put in, because social is a huge driver of engagement. During class, before class, after class, if kids get this opportunity to interact with students, to engage with students in some way, and if that feature is those set of features are done properly, I think it can drive huge engagement. So definitely a big focus area for us.
How about you, Arjun? So quick thoughts on socialization of learning?
Yeah, social is a very important aspect, and I would say that is one aspect which offline still lags behind online. So in my thought process, I think that eventually the system which will come into play over a period of time will be a hybrid model, where there will be a lot of things which can be done easily online. It will happen online. There will be still a lot of things which can happen offline. It will happen on offline. What we have tried to do, at least from an upgrade standpoint, we believe that social interaction in classrooms are very, very important. You learn from the teachers, you learn through your activities, you learn a lot from your co-students also. So what we tried to do was bring in a lot of aspects through forums and discussions. There is a TA in every class who forces discussion between the students, have small groups, do projects together. A lot of this happens on our platform. A lot of this happens outside the platform also, where we really encourage cohort level discussion. As Manan was saying, these are things which can easily go wrong also. You have to be extremely careful. You can't, on one part you have to be sure that you have a very fair and clear framework within which the student should interact. There are also possibilities of one bad apple who has a grouse with someone else, creating issues. So all those things, it's an aspect which is ever evolving. You have to have very clear policies around it, but still we try to push this a lot because we think that it's essential part of learning. So that's where the social aspect is sitting today. A lot of AI work is happening here also. Let's hope that eventually the online learning will catch us up with offline in the aspect of social learning.
Ashish, any closing thoughts on socialization, social commerce, things of that sort?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting topic, and it means culturally from a payment perspective it varies a lot, right? And PayPal took a experiment and which has been hugely successful. So we acquired a company called Venmo, right? And Venmo is a company which is a platform for P2P payments, right? One-to-one payments, and it's just loved by millennials in the US, right? And the key aspect of that is it adds a social element to the payment, right? Say I'm sending you money, I'll add some emojis to it, I'll add some comments to it, and make it on a paywall kind of a thing, which all my friend circles can see and things like that. So the kind of engagement we see on that platform is tremendous. And what now in the last 1-2 years, what we are looking to do is, because consumers are so hooked onto it, how do we monetize that, right? How do we get those consumers who are so engaged on that platform? Now, wherever PayPal is accepted across 25 million merchants, can somebody with a Venmo account itself pay directly, right? So we call it Pay with Venmo as a product. So because that's the kind of engagement these consumers have with that brand association, that means social elements are bringing in. So we're learning from that and now kind of trying to transport some of those things across the globe. But very relevant means we never thought that means payments could also be social, right? Because when I'm making a payment, why would I share with anybody, my friend, that I spent so much X amount on this particular thing? But interesting world we live in.
Thanks so much, Ashish. I think all five of you today have shared with us some of the key insights on the 3 Ps of the future of education: platforms, pedagogy, and payments. And this is going to govern the future of education on our planet. Thank you all very much. We've shot over just a few minutes, but I think the last question really brought it all together very well. Thank you all on behalf of all of us at Your Story, on behalf of everyone at PayPal. Thanks to our speakers, Kashyap, Manan, and Arjun. And thanks to our audience for your questions. We will carry on this discussion online after this. Thank you all so much. Have a very good evening. Take care.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.